Well, let's begin with the day's market action. Well, a late surge helped the Nifty as well as the Sensex end another range-bound session, close to 0.5% in the green. Banks led from the front, with the Nifty Bank ending the day at a record close. That index ended above the 42,200 mark for the first time ever. Mid-caps underperformed the benchmarks, with the index ending the day flat. Meanwhile, the slowdown in global growth has taken a toll on India's exports in October, with exports dropping below $30 billion. Trade deficit has widened to $27 billion. Latha Venkatesh is joining us now with more details. Latha.
The biggest takeaway from the October trade deficit numbers is the drop in exports at 29 billion. It's about 6 billion lower than what it was a year ago, what it was a month ago, and what is worse, it is the lowest export number we have had in 20 months. The last time we had below 30 billion was way back in February 2021. Now, imports have also gone down to 56.5 billion from a high of about 60 billion in August and July. But a fall is not enough. It still leaves a trade deficit of nearly $27 billion, $26.7 billion. And that's a little unsupportable. The trade deficit, the small fall that we see in trade deficit from about 30 billion in the last 2 months to 26 billion is only because of the fall in crude prices. And that means that it is still unsustainable. If you add the surplus that we make in services, after all, we are a software exporting giant. If we add that surplus, then the April-October trade deficit is 98 billion. By itself, the goods deficit in 7 months is 173 billion. Taking the surplus, the deficit falls to $98 billion. But if you extrapolate at the same level for the next 5 months, you will get a trade deficit of 170 billion. And that will mean that we can end up with a current account deficit of almost 3.5% of GDP. That's the big worry. And we did see a small fall in the rupee after the numbers were announced.
Well, speaking of global concerns, government officials believe that they will be approaching the fiscal roadmap with a sense of caution in FY24 amidst an uncertain global environment. Sapna Das joins us now with more details. Sapna, tell us, what are you picking up?
Indeed, what we are given to understand is that FY24, the government may actually approach the new financial year with a bit of caution, especially as far as the fiscal management is concerned. And I think the primary concern on that front would be trying to stick to the fiscal glide path. They have a glide path of, a fiscal deficit of under 4.5% by FY26. In case there's even a minor slippage in the current financial year on FD, then that glide path becomes all the more challenging. I suppose that's one of the concerns, and they're trying to make all efforts to make sure that 6.4% is not reached. At least that's the view as of now. Of course, the global uncertainty is going to be will continue to be a key challenge for the government, not just in terms of the fisc and the budget and all of that, but mainly in terms of the trade deficit numbers, the export numbers, the overall growth prospects. So there are enough headwinds at the moment globally, and I think that's what is going to be a challenge for them in the coming year. Hence, this note of caution that is being, indicated. Last but not the least, in terms of additional expenditure coming in, well, the supplementary demands for grants will come up in the winter session of Parliament. Additional demands on food and fertilizer subsidy need to be met. But here again, the government's view is very clear that all that money will only be released depending on the spending capacity of the ministries. So that's an indication that maybe all of that amount is not going to come in at one stroke. Last but not the least, the government is not looking at any additional borrowing in the current financial year. If need be, they will rely on the National Small Savings Fund, as they have always done in terms of deficit financing.
Right, Sapna, thanks a lot for that. Now, even as the fiscal roadmap looks challenging, tax mop-up remains robust. Here is the CBDT chief on the collections.
As of now, we are up 24% already vis-a-vis the last year, and in net terms, after issuing refunds of around 2 lakh of crores of rupees, which was around 1,10,000 crore last year in the corresponding period. On the gross basis also, our collections are 30% higher than the last year. So we are very hopeful that we would be achieving around 25% growth in the net collections over and above the budget estimates. And that will be a very positive development for the entire economy and for the development of our country. Home
Minister Amit Shah says that the Indian economy has seen a V-shaped recovery Speaking exclusively to Network 18, Home Minister said that the government has a roadmap to tackle inflation.
जहाँ तक महंगाई का सवाल है, पहले कोरोना के कारण और बाद में रशिया और यूक्रेन के युद्ध के कारण पूरे विश्व की सप्लाई चेन में बिखराव है और एक वैश्विक समस्या है जिसका असर कम मात्रा में भारत पर भी पड़ा है। मगर मैं देश की जनता को, गुजरात की जनता को सुनिश्चित करना चाहता हूं कि टेम्पररी फेज है। नरेंद्र मोदी सरकार ने बहुत अच्छे तरीके से इसकी रणनीति भी बनाई है और दुनिया में कोरोना के बाद मंदी से सबसे तेजी से उभरने वाले देशों में से एक देश भारत है। हमारी अर्थव्यवस्था वी शेप में रिकवर करी है और अब इस पर भी काफी अच्छा असर पड़ेगा। शायद रशिया यूक्रेन युद्ध न होता तो अब तक तो हम बाहर भी आ गए होंगे।
Well, after missing the date with Diwali, the government hopes to seal the free trade deal with the United Kingdom by March next year. Abhimanyu Sharma is joining us now with more details. Abhimanyu, tell us, what is the latest that you're picking up?
Government sources have indicated that the internal deadline for the proposed India-UK FTA is March 2023. However, the deadline will be of value if at all the chief negotiators from both the sides do reach a settlement based on a give-and-take arrangement as part of the discussions. Already 26 chapters were discussed threadbare before a lot of political developments had taken place in the United Kingdom. Sources have indicated that Indian government will have to look into the issues pertaining to IPR and it cannot allow evergreening as India is into generic medicine. A lot of analytics are involved behind the offers given as far as not just this FTA but other proposed FTAs are concerned. The trade deal with Australia has already been placed before their parliament and may get ratified by December. Also, sources have indicated that the third round of India-EU FTA talks are scheduled in India from the 28th of November to the 9th of December, of which 75 sessions on 19 policy areas are scheduled in this round. The India-Canada CEPA's fifth round is slated from the 14th November to the 18th of November, and apart from the usual areas, the trade deal is bound to cover areas like SMEs, trade and gender, labor and environment. It remains to be seen how early developments will take place in various FTA talks which have been initiated between India and several other countries.
Thanks a lot for that, Abhimanyu. Now, the 17th G20 summit has kicked off in Indonesia's Bali. The big focus so far has been the meeting between American President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The meeting could set the tone for improved US-China relationship in the days to come. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, meanwhile, has reiterated his call for peace and held several bilateral meetings on the sidelines, including one with US President Joe Biden. Here's a wrap of all the action from day one.
Competition should not turn into conflict. That was President Biden's key message to Chinese President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit in Bali, the first in-person meeting of the two leaders.
We had an open and candid conversation about our intentions and our priorities. It was clear, he was clear and I was clear, that we'll defend American interests and values, promote universal human rights, and stand up for the international order and work in lockstep with our allies and partners. We're going to compete vigorously, but I'm not looking for conflict. I'm looking to manage this competition responsibly.
Both leaders discussed the Ukraine-Russia war and agreed that any threat or use of nuclear weapons was totally unacceptable. While Biden raised objections to China's coercive and aggressive actions over Taiwan, the Chinese side conveyed that the Taiwan question was an internal matter and a red line that should not be crossed in US-China relations. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also said the world was big enough for US and China to develop and prosper. Tensions over the Ukraine-Russia war and its severe economic fallout is clearly weighing on every leader's mind at the G20. Addressing leaders virtually, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that it was time for Russia's war to end. He also requested for an extension of the Black Sea grain deal. At the summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met President Joe Biden, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, President Emmanuel Macron and President Mark Rutte of Netherlands. PM Modi called for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine and warned about the consequences of the fertilizer shortage that the world is currently facing. Prime Minister Modi said at G20, and I quote, "I have repeatedly said that we have to find a way to return to the path of ceasefire and diplomacy in Ukraine. I'm confident that next year when G20 meets in the holy land of Buddha and Gandhi, we will convey a strong message of peace." UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has a 5-point agenda at the G20, which includes ending Putin's weaponization of food and energy. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said, and I quote, "It is notable that Putin didn't feel able to join us here. Maybe if he had, we could get on with sorting things out, because the single biggest difference that anyone could make is for Russia to get out of Ukraine and end this war." End of quote. There is still a question mark on whether the G20 will be able to arrive at a joint declaration due to lack of consensus on whether to condemn Russia and President Putin for the war against Ukraine. In New Delhi, Parikshit Luthra.
Well, back home, Gautam Adani-led Adani Group has received SEBI's approval to float an open offer to acquire a further 26% stake in NDTV. The Adani Group already owns 29% in the media house. The open offer will commence on the 22nd of November. Meanwhile, global retail giant Walmart delivered a strong third quarter. Its revenue jumped nearly 9% year-on-year to more than $150 billion due to buoyant grocery sales. However, it recorded a net loss of $1.8 billion, but that did not deter investors as Walmart shares rallied in trade. That's because the company has raised its profit forecast for 2023. Meanwhile, the big tech austerity drive is set to continue after Meta. Amazon is set to lay off 10,000 employees. Shilpa Ranipeta is joining us with more.
11,000 at Meta, 10,000 likely at Amazon, 6,000 at Snap, nearly 4,000 at Twitter, about 1,000 each at Microsoft and Salesforce. These are just some of the big layoff numbers that have come in over the last couple of weeks. The human resource downsizing began a year or so ago with mortgage lender Better letting go of over 3,000 people across multiple rounds. It has now extended to big tech, once considered the safe haven of job security. Now, according to job tech platform TrueUp's tech layoff tracker, over 183,000 people have been handed the pink slips so far in 2022, and analysts say that we may not be at the end of the jobs cut cycle. How did we get here, though? The simple explanation: excessive hiring fueled by optimism that the shift to tech solutions in the wake of the pandemic would not get reversed or slow down. Now, tech companies are known to hire in droves, but with people now returning outdoor, going back to offices and doing more things offline, engagement on these tech platforms has been dropping steadily. Now, this has resulted in revenue growth taking a hit and is cannonballed into a fall in valuations. Then came Russia's invasion of Ukraine, heightened inflation, rising interest rates, and companies across the board were hit for a loop by these stocks. Now, tech leaders have since gone on record blaming these shocks for drastic measures that they have had to take. This is from Twitter's founder Jack Dorsey saying, "We grew the company too quickly," to Meta co-founder Mark Zuckerberg saying, "This did not play out the way we expected," to even Stripe co-founder and CEO Patrick Collison saying, "We overhired for a world that we're in." Now, companies are being forced to cut costs, prioritize growth and increase efficiency as companies rework and realign their priorities, and freezing hires and job cuts cannot be ruled out.
Right, Shilpa, thanks a lot for that. Now, there's also been a churn at the Meta India top deck. Abhijit Bose has resigned as WhatsApp India head. Rajiv Agarwal has resigned as the public policy director of Meta India. Meanwhile, Shivnath Thukral has been appointed as the new director for public policy at Meta India. Meta, in a statement, said that the resignations are completely unrelated to the recent news cycles, indicating that they should not be seen along the recent layoffs. Now, in court action, the Gujarat High Court came down heavily on the Morbi civic body after no representatives turned up at a PIL hearing. This despite a court notice being issued. Now, the Morbi bridge collapsed last month and killed over 140 people. The court also questioned the manner in which the contract was awarded for repair and maintenance of the bridge. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court reserved its judgment on a plea seeking additional restrictions on free speech for MPs, MLAs, as well as ministers to discourage them from indulging in hate speech. The centre argued against a 5-judge bench hearing the matter, claiming that the court had already prescribed detailed guidelines on hate speech. Well, with that, it's time now to slip into a very short break. But coming up, the government's amended rules for broadcasters causes a stir. The industry is asking who will foot the bill for the proposed 30-minute public service content in national interest that is mandatory for all TV channels. A special report on the other side. Well, news now from the startup corner. Shruti Mishra joins in with all the action coming in with startup space. Shruti, take it away.
Well, thank you for that. Here are the top headlines from the startup world. Elon Musk sacks a Twitter employee via tweet after he contested that the new CEO's remark on the microblogging site being slow on Android devices. The billionaire, however, deleted the tweet later. The Android developer, who goes by the handle Eric Fraunhofer, was offered jobs by social media platform Reddit and other companies on the same thread. These companies assured him, and I quote, "We won't treat you like this," end of quote. Singapore-based Sea has laid off more than 7,000 employees, or around 10% of its workforce, over the past 6 months, the information reported. The e-commerce and gaming firm withdrew its e-commerce revenue forecast for the year in August. Moving on, SoftBank, whose holdings in Paytm, Policy Bazaar and Delivery are currently worth $1.8 billion, will pare its stakes gradually over the next 2 years so as to not trigger a panic selling as the lock-in for the pre-IPO investors in the 3 companies expires over the next 10 days, says Money Control. Google Play announced its own UPI-based automatic payment option for users in India who pay for in-app subscriptions. The new Google Play UPI autopay payment option will help users make recurring payments with ease using any UPI application that supports the feature. With that, it's back to you.
Well, the new guidelines for uplinking and downlinking of television channels in India, which was approved by the cabinet last week, has created quite a stir. CNBC-TV18 Shilpa Ranipeta reports that one of the biggest concerns is the 30-minute of public service programming mandated by the rules, and the broadcasters are hoping for more clarity on this subject. Take a look.
India's broadcast industry will soon have to comply with a slew of new regulations which have been cleared by the cabinet. The INB ministry insists that some of the new guidelines on uplinking and downlinking signals, like the 5-year validity of news licenses instead of the current 1 year, are aimed at making permissions and operations easier for companies. But there are a few guidelines that are giving broadcasters heartburn. One of these is the requirement that channels, whether news or sports or general entertainment channels, air public service content for at least 30 minutes a day. The guidelines specify 8 themes for these broadcasts, which include health, education, agriculture, and women welfare.
A lot of uncertainties here. Firstly, can this be shown, in phases of 5 minutes throughout the day? That's one. Secondly, we don't know that, whether it has to be shown in the night or morning or what time slot of the day. Thirdly, can this be integrated, because you already have a lot of content which is of national interest in the form of, TV shows. You've got reality, large-scale non-fiction content. You've got films as well. So a lot of clarity is still awaited.
The cost of producing and airing this content is another point of confusion. Broadcasters say producing such content, especially if regular or existing content is not counted as eligible, will add to expenses. They point to difficulties in monetizing such content and a weak revenue mobilization environment as added pressure points.
Informational programming that is, that may have programming around education, spread of literacy, have to pay carriage fees to a distribution platform operator. There are also restrictions on price for your channels that can be charged, so they cannot recoup investment there. Your ability to realize revenues is constrained because you have price ceilings on what you can charge for your channels. Now, if there's a down market, advertisers are just not spending as much, etc., then that's an added economic burden.
There is some hope that the government will step in either by subsidizing the costs involved or diverting some of the DAVP's budgets to sponsor such programming. But there is no clarity on this yet. The new guidelines have also left sports channels disappointed. They were expecting a waiver on the 1 lakh rupee processing fee incurred on each live telecast, but this has not been forthcoming. Sports broadcasters say this processing fee will increase cost of production by nearly 5 crore rupees per sporting event.
The broadcasters already purchased the rights to these events at an extremely high cost. Cricket is not the only thing to sport. There are so many other things. There are already many profit pressures on the linear TV business model. Regulators are interested in incentivizing the entry of participants into the game. Unfortunately, a principle of this sort, while it might do something for raising revenue for the government of India, creates a disproportionate disincentive.
The INB ministry says that it will meet with stakeholders before issuing detailed guidelines, and the industry hopes it will get more clarity on numerous aspects of the new rules soon. Indications are that stakeholders may also push for rules and policies that incentivize broadcasting to produce such programming rather than a command and control approach. In Mumbai with Shibani Garat, Shilpa Ranipeta.
Well, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Business Hour. But before we leave, the world population has touched 8 billion today, according to the United Nations. The figure means that 1 billion people have been added to the global population in just 12 years. Meanwhile, the next billion people are expected to come only from 8 countries, including India and Pakistan. Something to think about. Thanks so much for watching.